Welcome back to another episode of Bucket List Living with Brad Norwood. I'm your host, Brad Norwood, and we're kicking off season 2 today. I am so excited about this. I'm excited about the guests that I have on to do season 2, episode 1. And the reason why is because John Anderson has a huge part in me being a bucket list guy. John is the one that introduced me to the bucket list life plan. And I want to welcome him to the show. He's known as that franchise guy. John, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. I did not realize when you set this up, I was going to be the launch for season 2. So I appreciate it for sure.
You sure are. And like I said, it's fitting that you're here to kick off season 2 because, quite frankly, you helped me kick off the bucket list. Let's talk about, though, John, how that happens. Quite frankly, I'll give my side of the story. We met on LinkedIn,
Right.
and I reached out to you because franchises are phenomenal prospects for me to put through incentive travel programs and to use incentives for employee appreciation and rewards. And quite frankly, when I reached out to you, I thought you were just a franchise owner. I didn't realize, pardon me for the terms, that you were a franchise broker that I know a lot of
Right.
people refer to you as. So tell people what that franchise guy really does.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think this is a good way to back into it too. We can go into my history and talk about the franchises I do own because that is part of it as well. But I think it's important to convey what exactly is, and I've been referred to as a coach, a consultant, a recruiter, but probably franchise broker is the most common term. And for some reason, people like to come up with these alternative names for it. But the bottom line is I help people who have an interest. They don't even know for sure generally when we start working together that this is something they want to do, but they have an interest in learning what exactly is a franchise, how does it work, and how would it work for me? So, most of them are employed, some have lost a job, some are other business owners, some even already own other franchises, and obviously that's a little different conversation. But the reality is, I firmly believe, I'm not going to say everybody, but I'll say 98% of people can be successful in a franchise if they're placed in the right one. And so it's not just finding somebody who's got the drive and the motivation. Those things are important, but it's also finding the right franchise that fits their skills and their goals. And, if they have to pick up kids from school at 3 o'clock every day, or their burning desire is to coach the baseball team at 5 o'clock 4 times a week, we have to work around that. And if they are 100% don't like sales and they never want to have anything to do with sales, well, there's a lot of franchises we need to avoid. So all of those kind of things are examples of what we get into.
Yeah, and that's fun to talk about because, quite frankly, like I said, I've been involved in your process several times now. By the way, I appreciate you hanging with me until we find that right fit. But you're exactly right. Finding that right fit is so important. Whether it is the sales mechanism or the ball games at 5 o'clock,
Mhm.
talk about the leadership in people that sometimes might scare them off from getting into a franchise. They think, well, I would like to do that, but I'm not necessarily, I don't see myself as a leader. Talk about that and getting in a franchise and how franchise can help them develop that role.
Well, the interesting thing about franchising is it's really a hybrid almost, or a bridge between. So if somebody's been an effective corporate manager or they've been an effective salesperson, those skill sets translate very, very well into managing a team with a franchise business, because a franchise is going to provide you with a system, a product, a service. But the big thing they provide you with is the infrastructure and the support so that you can focus on running the business day to day and leading the team. Um, Now, do you have to be a natural born leader to do it? Absolutely not. I mean, there's places for everybody in franchising, but it certainly helps. And what franchises are looking for 90% of the time is that person who's an effective manager of people, or wants to be, and is an effective leader, or wants to be, and is willing to learn and follow a process to get to that point where they focus on building the team and the systems run the business and the people run the business. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, it did. It did. And I want to talk about you mentioned the systems. I want to talk about how important that is within the franchise and with any business
Mhm.
that you have structured systems. Talk about and maybe even give an example of a franchise or two if you can that have just wonderful systems that the system works and then it depends on the leadership of the owner.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's, there's a lot of names people know, and then there's going to be a lot that maybe you don't. I mean, there's some interesting things in spaces that people would never think of. And staffing is one that comes to mind. It takes a long time to build those businesses, but I know a lot of people in staffing and recruiting companies that make really good incomes. Express Employment, the Outwork Group, are two that come to mind that are just, they've got all the support, the systems, they handle all the back office stuff, the HR stuff, the legal stuff. So that franchisee really just focuses on building relationships with employers who need staff, and then they hire somebody typically to be the recruiter who interviews employees and stuff like that. So you build your team like that, and there's some other functions to it, but the systems really allow you to focus on those two roles and build a big business out of those two functions. Um, there's a company called Fast Signs that a lot of people think about, why would you get into a sign company right now? And it's just one of the most, in fact, Catherine Monson, the CEO, is the current IFA president or chairwoman. I forget what her term is, but and just a fabulously run organization in terms of staying ahead of the curve. If you think about sign and graphics business, how it might have changed in the last 20 years, right, with the internet and such. Um, and of course you get into the world of food, and there's a lot of examples people are gonna be a little more familiar with. There's a franchise I got involved with at a very early stage back in 2006 in the children's entertainment space. We've been through 3 leadership changes in 12 years, a lot of struggles, a lot of competition. And, my personal recommendation is, stay far away. It's, I'm in it and I've done it very well, but I learned a lot on the side without the support of corporate. So it's important that you get into the right franchise and understand what you're getting into, because they're not all equal by any stretch.
Right. And that's where really your job and that you take a lot of pride in, I know, and through going through the process with you, that's kind of where you become the coach, right?
Hmm.
Talk about that process. Somebody listening today is interested in starting a franchise. What does the process look like going through it with you?
Well, and so there's a couple ways that we kind of start that process, if you will. A lot of times it's just a phone conversation. Let's spend 15 minutes on the phone, get acquainted, and see if I'm a fit to help you. But there are a lot of people who approach me, whether it's LinkedIn or other mechanisms that we have, to generate leads, where they're kind of putting their toe in the water. They're not sure. I wrote a book 4 years ago. It's a very easy read, and I'll just offer them, hey, start with this book, and then let's get back together in a week and see if it's something that it might be worth, taking the next step. But the short version is, I have a form, but I really prefer a conversational interview, much like this. Sometimes it's Zoom, sometimes it's just a traditional phone call, about an hour, and we go through goals, dreams, skills, lifestyle needs. Finances is a big part of it, and I create a profile out of that. The second piece, and sometimes we do this before that call if possible, I have a 10-minute assessment that's online that we have people do. It's a lot like a DISC assessment if you've ever done those, but it's personality and values specifically designed for franchising, and creating a profile out of your answers in terms of what kind of a franchise you might be a fit for. So we combine those things together, and then I create a profile out of that I'll screen against 500 plus franchises that I work with. And so how do I have access to that many? Well, number one, I'm certified by multiple industry organizations. Most consultants are only in one. And so, each of those organizations might have 350 different franchises, and there's some overlap. So, and then I also represent some independently, like the men's hair salon that I'm involved with. So, roughly 500 on any given day. And, I'll come up with potential matches. I'll screen them more manually, make sure they're available in somebody's territory. In your case, we obviously want to go, well, is this particular brand? It might be a great fit, but if they're not available in Northwest Arkansas, it doesn't do us much good. So we don't want to spend any time on that. And so that is the process, really the front end of getting somebody to the point of, hey, let's talk about 5 to 7 specific ideas and see what you think. And then from that point, I kind of hold their hand through the whole research process, whether it's, and many people will get started with that and just figure out it's not a fit. We'll move on to another one. Sometimes timing is a big part of it in people's lives. I've had multiple people come back, more than a year later and re-engage and start the process over. So.
Awesome. So you mentioned 5 to 7. Is that about average for how many most people start with, per se, to start looking for that right fit? Is that about what pops up through your analysis, is 5 to 7 that you give people to look at?
It's a number that really the only reason I kind of zero in on that number, and to take a step back, when I did this process, the way I found Bounce You, the family entertainment franchise I'm involved with for 13 years now, I went through a guy like me. And so back then it was common practice to just show 3 at a time. And I distinctly remember going through 3 going, no, none of those are even close, dude. I think I need to find somebody else. And he's like, give me one more shot. And the second round we went through it, and I found the Bounce You business. And that's a whole nother conversation on how it resonated and I got involved with that. But 5 to 7 to me is a manageable number that somebody can absorb in an hour.
Yeah.
That's it. There's really no magic to it beyond, you get beyond 45 minutes to an hour and people start to get fuzzy, you just lose it. And you get any more than 5, 6, 7 and people have a hard time really retaining what they need to, is this something I want to look more into? So, we'll spend 5 minutes on each one. It's not a big detailed, it's a high level. And then I'll send them when we're done, web links and videos and collateral to review and give them a couple days to digest it. The whole goal though is to eliminate most of those and pick 1 or 2 to focus on, not trying to evaluate 5 to 7. That's way too much.
Sure. Yeah, no, I get that. It's funny you mentioned that because we come to every customer through incentive travel with 4 choices, because 3 is kind of like you said, no. But 4 seems to be just the right amount. So right. Every time we go to a customer, we always present 4 options. That's funny you mentioned that. So John, let's talk a little bit about bucket list with franchising. Mm-hmm. How many people come to you and say, this is on my bucket list to own a franchise, or what might be one of the biggest bucket list moments that somebody's had through a franchise?
Well, and it's interesting. And I was thinking as you're bringing this up to ask you, as you're going through the bucket list, life coaching and whatnot, how many people say, I'd love to own a business, not necessarily a franchise, because a lot of people don't tie those together immediately. A franchise just makes it a little more palatable. But how many people think about owning a business? I would say almost 100% of people at least have a passing thought in their lifetime, I'd love to be my own boss.
Yeah.
And, does that mean they've really put a lot of thought into it? How many people have seriously wanted to pursue it? That number drops a little bit, but everybody has this idea of, they recognize, and sometimes it's not 100% accurate. They think, being a business owner is the way to, build wealth and equity and make a fortune. And in many cases it is, but it's not universally so. You've got to find the right business and be in the right situation for you and properly capitalized. I mean, and I work with a lot of people that the end result of our process is they really weren't comfortable with starting a business, even within franchising. And that's okay. I mean, that's what the whole process is for. And so if you look at my LinkedIn page, I've got a number of testimonials from people who ultimately either chose another business opportunity or decided not to do franchising at all, but but they fully endorsed my process, that speaks a lot to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I said, we've been through the process. I think we're going through it for our third time now.
Mhm.
We're 1 for 3 so far with
Right.
the bucket list, which has been great. The coaching has, I never thought I would be a coach. In fact, we were talking about a separate franchise and doing what you do so well. You said, well, hang on a second. I'd like to present this to you. I don't know much about it, but I'd like for you to look at this certification, if nothing else.
Right.
And lo and behold, here we are.
Yeah.
But John, as people like me and you, they want to own businesses. I get that. And I get it all the time going through the life plan. People
Right.
say, well, I'd like to work for myself, or I'd like to start a side hustle where I can do something on the side. But I think as we hear all the time, fear comes in and the head trash comes in and tells them, no,
Mhm.
I can't. Does your process bring that out to them? And sometimes you have to say, do you have to bump them along and encourage them to
Sure.
take the plunge?
Well, not necessarily to take the plunge, but I do. So that's, there's some process and systems to what I do, and then there's some massaging the process that is really more where it's my experience, and oftentimes it's just in the conversations. Oftentimes I hear it as because I sit in on a lot of the meetings that candidates will have with the franchisors as they are learning about the brand. And a lot of times I can hear it in the silence or the lack of questions. Sometimes it's questions they're asking or how they're asking them, because I've already started a relationship with these people. And sometimes it's when we're just talking, I get it's experience.
Yeah.
It's my spider sense goes off and it says, all right, you guys are at the stage where you've never owned a business before and it's becoming real. And it's like, okay, you might have to write $100,000 check and get another $100,000 loan, or maybe it's 50,000 and 150, or maybe it's 500,000. I mean, there's all kinds of numbers out there, and there's even lower ones. People can get in with less, but you're still writing a check, and whatever that number is, it's significant to that person, and it's a lifestyle change, and it is kind of a plunge, and so I don't find myself in the role of saying, hey, I need to be the guy. I don't want to sell you on it. I don't want to push you off the ledge. But if I believe we're in a good place and the right fit, I want to walk with you, and let's hold hands and jump together. How's that?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's got to be their decision, and I've got to coach them to that point where they can make it. And to be honest, it's not my role to exactly eliminate all the fear either, because it's real and it's justified in many cases. And there certainly is a lot of people who never get past it, and that's okay. Like I said, it's business ownership and running a franchise is not for everybody, and it shouldn't be presented as
Right.
such. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And like you said, Landon, what you do is not every franchise fits everybody either. But as I put myself in a listener's position to this show, I'm going, okay, John, this sounds great. And you're going to coach me through this, but I don't have the money, or what's it going to cost me to
Mhm.
get in? And I know it's a wide range based on the 500 that plus
Mhm.
that you offer. But really it's an easy process to get into and navigate and look at. What's it going to cost me to get in?
Yeah. I'd say on the low side, to get into what I'm going to call a real opportunity that's not a vending machine, or not, there's some side gigs out there that we could get you into with 10 or 20 grand. The reality is you probably need 25 to 50 preferably, and it doesn't have to be cash. Maybe it's coming out of a home equity loan, or there's some other ways to get it, but you do need to have some assets. You need to have and I'd say, so on the low end, the ability to get probably 50 grand. There's some really good business opportunities out there that you can make 6 figures and up with a $60,000-$70,000 total investment. And whether that's all your capital or some of yours in a loan, there's some various ways to slice that up. So you don't have to have a fortune. You need to be committed. The old adage, where there's a will, there's a way, often comes into play. Some people are able to get money from parents or relatives. Retirement plans. There's some programs out there, so there's all ways to get capital, but you do need to have a little bit of your own to get started.
Yeah. What's the top end? What's the most expensive buy-in that you've seen be
Uh,
successful?
Anything that's involving buying your own real estate is going to ramp the cost up a lot, and so you can get into some of these big trampoline parks, or even some of the high-end fast food places that make you buy your own pad, buy your own building and all that. You can be, you know, 2, 3, $4 million to get a McDonald's open. So um, it's and obviously in many cases the income that you'll generate out of it, the ROI down the road will warrant it. But that's all part of the process. You have to figure out, if a bigger investment generates a bigger return, then that's a good thing.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Do you have a sweet spot? Do you have some favorites? I don't know if you can name them or not, but do
Yeah.
you have a sweet spot buy-in with some favorite models of franchises that you like to promote?
I do, and there's a couple of different spaces. For somebody that's looking for more career transition, I mentioned the staffing. That's typically going to be 150, ish, maybe 175,000, depends on how big of a territory you take on. And those are harder to finance, so you need to have a little more of your own capital for something like that. The home care business has been unbelievable the last decade, and will continue to grow. It's expanded during COVID. Excuse me. Companies within that space. I work a lot with a company called Homewell, Texas-based company, but they're nationwide. And Home Watch is another one I work with. There's about a half a dozen that are. I like with that space. I like the family-run business that VC hasn't gotten involved with yet, or private equity doesn't run it. You're not this big corporation, and that's personal preference, to be honest, more than necessarily the right way to go for somebody. So a lot of the brands I work with fit that space. They've got 100 locations, but still room to grow, and run by founders or by family. Um, and then when you start talking about maybe a little lesser investment, and some things again that are timely, as you get into the home services category, which is very broad, and it's everything from kitchen remodeling to painting. Maybe it's outdoor lighting or landscaping, window washing. There's a company I really like that they brand themselves, it's called Shack Shine, brand themselves as exterior, it's like car detailing for the exterior home. So anything you need to do to clean up and make your house look nice on the outside, they handle that. The hair salon business I've been very involved with for a few years. I own Knockouts Haircuts for Men myself, here in Tulsa. And we've had some bumps during the COVID period, but we're coming out of that. And I think there's a lot of interest in that space for somebody who wants a more passive investment. Maybe they want to keep their job full time. Things in that space are very interesting. And I've done a lot of work with a children's brand of hair salons called Sharky's Cuts for Kids, a well-run company up in the Northeast. I think they're in Connecticut. And I know, I can just keep going. There's interesting things in spaces that people don't think about, like, junk hauling and moving and things like that. One that we're working with currently. Property management. I do a lot of work with a company called Property Management Inc. You can get started in that business for 60, 70 grand and get into property management. And there's a lot of people who've taken that investment and are making, north of 6 figures with it. So.
Sure. Yeah. So, John, how do people listening, they're interested in franchise, want to work for themselves, maybe even just want to explore it? How do they get a hold of you?
Well, obviously thatfranchiseguy.com is, there's contact information on there. They can download my book there. My email is simple. It's john@thatfranchiseguy.com, or lakeportfranchisegroup.com is my other one. But, and then my phone number is 918-962-0506. And, to tie it back to what you do, I think it's a bucket list item for many people to consider starting their own business, and I'm certainly honored to be a part of that process and the discovery.
Yeah, and you do again. You do a great job. I'm again on my third discovery process
Yeah.
with you. We're looking now at possibly some junk hauling, a junk hauling franchise, and the process. This one's been even more in depth than the first two we went through, just because of the nature of the business. But you've done a phenomenal job keeping up with us, helping us, guide us through the process, and we appreciate that. And I encourage anybody that's listening and watching, if you're interested, just think you might be interested in working
Right.
for yourself and owning a franchise, to reach out to John. He gave you his contact information. I'll list it in the notes of the show as well, and you can always reach out to me. John, before we wrap up, though, I've got to ask you, we ask everybody on the show, what are you being intentional about, or what are you challenging yourself with today?
Well, hopefully it doesn't have to be just one. There's a couple things that are at the top of my list today. One, just as a timely deal, is the president recently signed off on another round of PPP funding, and we're expecting the banks to start taking those applications any day. So I'm getting my P&Ls updated and preparing that, because as optimistic as I am about franchising in general, the two businesses that we got involved with over the last 15 years, children's entertainment and hair salons, have been significantly impacted by COVID. So it's really important to get that additional funding to keep us to get to the end of the light at the end of the tunnel, if you will. The other piece that I'm really been working on a lot over the last 2 weeks, and is typical this time of year, I've just been busier than normal and haven't had as much time to dedicate to it, is my annual plans. And I've got four. I've got knockouts, haircuts for men. I've got, the Bounce You business. I have my franchise consulting, which is my bread and butter, and a personal plan. And you got to, I like to have it all done by the first Monday of every year. I missed that a little bit, but I'm going to get it wrapped up this week.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love that you have a personal plan within all of your business plans. That's what we coach within the bucket list
Yeah.
life plan, is that your life plan doesn't have to fit into your work plan. Your work plan has to fit into your life plan. And that's so
That's
important to do. I tell people all the time, we hear the phrase, if mama's not happy, nobody's happy.
mm,
But really, if you're not happy at home, nobody's going to be happy at work. And that's where a personal life plan together with your family, even if you have a family, putting that together can be a huge success. And it's part of bucket list living. John, thanks so much for being on today. Those of you that are listening, again, if you want to find John, you can find him at thatfranchiseguy.com. Find him, John Anderson, at LinkedIn. He's a great follow on LinkedIn, by the way. And I know a lot of people that listen to the show are connected with us on LinkedIn. And don't forget to subscribe to DreamIT Professional Events and Bucket List Living with Brad Norwood. We'll catch you next time. And until then, remember, the bucket list life is a life worth living.